Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Esoteric. I got another fun and exciting episode for you guys this Friday because we're going to be taking a look at another exceedingly rare arcade board. This is going to be Dangerous Curves by Taito on the Type JC PCB. I know I've already shown you guys Operation Tiger, and that was on the Power PC variant, but this is running on a Motorola 68040 CPU and is the predecessor to the Operation Tiger board. And fun fact, the United States Postal Service managed to lose this box for almost 2 months. They marked it as delivered, it never showed up, and then one day it was just on my doorstep. Mark that as a small win. But this is an absolutely massive PCB. It's one that I've been looking for a very long time, and it is one that is exceedingly rare to actually locate in the wild. This one came to me direct from China, and it took about 4 months to actually arrive on my doorstep. Granted, some of that was the post office fault, but you will see this board does run with some caveats, and I will get into those shortly. But the fact that this is in my collection and I'm almost ready to play it is a massive amount of fun. I know it's janky, I know it's ugly 3D, and if you know anything about me or the channel, you know that is my cup of tea. When taking a look at the board itself, it is another massive board. All of these custom 3D boards, it was model 1, 2, or 3, and you have the Namco System 22, 23 stuff, or Taito's 3D boards, they were always much larger than the traditional 2D boards you saw. And right in the middle here is going to be that Motorola 68040, and it is in a ball grid array package. A lot of times when you see 680X series chips, they are going to have pins coming out of the side of them, so it's not often you get to see a ball grid array 68040, but it is a fun time all the same. And compare that to the Operation Tiger PCB that I just recently showed you, but the big difference between those two are going to be the Power PC chip on the Operation Tiger versus 68040 on the rest of the Type JC boards, as well as enhanced digital signal processors from Texas Instruments that are going to be putting up the 3D. But right off the top, when this board came in, this was absolutely disgusting. Thankfully, that is not cockroach goo. It does happen sometimes. It's smelly and it's terrible to deal with. At some point in time, this board has been reworked. Now, I can't figure out exactly what's been reworked. I don't know if they switched all these customs out because it does look like it is still machine soldered, but the massive amount of flux residue left behind on this board, I have never seen anything like this in my years of collecting arcade PCBs. It is really on there. With a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, I can start taking it off, but this is going to take multiple hours. It is gunked onto the pins, it is on the PCB. This thing has been probably sitting in a warehouse somewhere for 10 to 15 years, but you see there, it does get a little bit cleaner, but it's still going to take me a long time. Now, as far as arcade PCBs are concerned, the amount of bodges on the Type JC for Dangerous Curves, I have never seen this many field repairs ever. Seems like one of the engineers that developed the board must have made some mistakes on some of the chips because there are these bodges all around them with capacitors in line. It is very strange. I'm not sure what they were doing here, but it seems like this board was giving the engineers a lot of trouble. Now up here, this Ensonic chip is going to be part of the sound processing, and you're going to see that's bodged as well, and it came with a white hair, maybe from my dog, but this just came out of the box. I'm assuming it came from the factory wherever they bought this thing, and I got it from. I'm going to take a look under the sticker here that just says the board is okay. We've got a couple Toshiba chips, nothing too exciting, but I do leave these stickers on in the end. Kind of tells the story of where these boards have come from. But the sound side of this board is very interesting, and I did a video almost a year ago, maybe further, about another board, which I'll show you just in a moment. But you'll see this Ensonic Otis chip right here. This is the same sound processor on the Atari Panther prototype sound development board, a console from Atari that was supposed to come out before the Jaguar that never technically released. It uses the same sound chip though, so you can tell what the Atari Panther would have sounded like if you can get your hands on a Taito Type JC board. They're both very rare, but the Otis is definitely going to be a lot more rare as far as the development soundboard is concerned. That's kind of a fun little detail about how hardware is shared between multiple companies and platforms. And you see we're going to have another chip with another bodge on it. I counted about 17 different bodges on this board, and there are some points in which they even drilled out pathways to bypass them, looks like with a drill bit. Before we get too far into that though, let's take a look at the edge connectors here. We have a standard JAMA setup, which is going to carry all of the inputs for the board outside of the analog steering controls, which I will get to in a moment. We also have that power connector down below. You can power it more than one way. These two BNC connectors, which I have not figured out what they do yet, and this massive 60-pin connector at the bottom. We will get into that in just a moment. But these boards are big and they are multiple sided. You'll see here everything that makes up kind of the 3D and code processing portion of a Type JC. And if we flip this around, we're going to see the game itself underneath. on this subboard. It's big, it's massive, it's filled with the chips, it's got everything I crave. And you will see just how many ROM chips are on board. By my count, there's 47 different ROM chips, some with erasable UV windows, but mostly factory developed. And you will see that there's even unpopulated slots for even more ROM chips. This could hold 54 chips on board at any single time. And you will see most of them are silked as Taito customs. They probably are just an off-the-shelf ST part or something like that, but I can't really tell because they do have those custom codes on them. But it is one of the boards with the most amount of ROM chips I've ever seen on an arcade game. And hey, if you're going to spend the money, you may as well get a lot of chips while you're doing it. Compare that to the PowerPC Type JC for Operation Tiger. You have a lot less chips on board, but they are higher capacity just because storage mediums had enhanced since the original Dangerous Curves came out. But you'll see here on this section here and the connector, we have 4 bodge wires and 4 drill marks where they go through a screw standoff hole there. They actually literally drilled the PCB to bypass those pathways and traces to get those signals somewhere else. That's one that even I've never seen. And on the bottom board here, there's so many unpopulated areas for Taito customs. These boards were developed to have enhancements in mind further on down the line, so depending what game you get, you might see a completely different chip layout. You're never quite sure. But that's a lot of the reason why I've loved collecting these obscure 90s 3D platforms, because so many times they're undocumented or barely documented, and I get to learn stuff about them and show you guys stuff we've never seen before. But enough about the board itself, let's get into the game. This is the startup sequence, and it does check everything going on with different RAMs, the digital signal processor, everything it needs until it gets into the game. It's like a 20 to 30 second boot up sequence, not the slowest I've ever seen, not the fastest either, but after the wait a moment prompt here, it's going to load in, it's going to tell you the game is for Japan only, and then we are very quickly going to get the splash screen for Dangerous Curves. This game 100% does run, and you will see here in the attract screen there is some graphical corruption. Now here's the thing about the Type JC board, there's multiple revisions, and if you try to convert a game from one to the other, some of the gal chip locations may cause some texture issues. It seems like this was originally a landing gear PCB that may have been converted over to Dangerous Curves. They may have put the ROM board on top of a motherboard that's not perfectly suited for it. It is very minimal, and maybe I can bodge some more wires around to bypass it, but that little bit of graphical corruption is just because somebody somewhere, maybe in China, maybe in Japan, maybe last year, maybe 20 years ago, made it a ROM board to a slightly incompatible motherboard. The good thing is the game still 100% plays, it executes code, and it will work, outside of one very big fundamental flaw that I cannot quite yet determine. I do not know where the pins go for gas, for brake, and for steering. There are no manuals for Dangerous Curves out there. There's no manuals for side by side. I have no idea where I'm supposed to actually put the pins. So right now I can change the views, I can start the game, I can look in the rearview mirror. I just can't actually accelerate or steer, which obviously is a lot of what a driving game is. Somewhere on this big connector are the sense pins for steering, gas, and brake. I know where 5 volt is, I know where ground is. Those are the 2 signals you need for analog potentiometers. I just don't know where to put those voltages in. Guess the wrong one, you're going to burn some stuff up. But something like side by side here does emulate in a MAME, and I may have to start looking at the emulation and going through the driver to try to understand where those pins are going. But here's my request to you out there. If you know of a manual for Dangerous Curves, even if I have to buy it, please let me know. I'd be happy to scan it, because I really want to play this game, not just stare at the car sitting here. Now going into the test mode, you can configure some small things. You can switch the game to free play. You can go from difficulty normal, medium, high, all the way to easy. I just put it at easy because I've never played the game before. Not that I actually can, but if we go over to the input adjustments and the switch test here, you're going to see that I've got shift up and down, I've got the rear view mirror, I've got switch view, I've got coin. I just don't have any analog data for any of the actual driving mechanics. Now, landing gear in MAME does work. Unfortunately, I also can't find a landing gear manual anywhere with a wiring diagram inside of it. And here's the thing, some Dangerous Curves manuals do exist online, but they are just repair part manuals. They do not have a wiring diagram. Luckily, it seems like landing gear is going to be using an analog system because they do have that flight stick. So if I can find a manual for this game, I could probably transpose the data over. And unfortunately, in MAME, Dangerous Curves, it just doesn't boot whatsoever. So basically what I have here is an exceedingly rare PCB that is 100% working. and I just need to determine the location of 3 pins on a big connector so that I can actually steer, accelerate, and hit the brakes. And honestly, with racing games, who even needs brakes? I only actually need to find 2 pins. But that is the Type JC motherboard with the 68040 processor on it, the generation before Operation Tiger. It is a game that barely anyone knows exists. It's in my collection, and at some point in time, I will bring you a full game playthrough the minute I can actually hit the gas. And that's the problem with collecting stuff like this. Sometimes if you don't have the manual and the game works, you still need to wait weeks, months, maybe even years to find that information, because trying to guess at what pin to use, I could succeed or I could release the magic smoke. Sure that, leave me a comment down below. This board is fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.